What if I told you that the bloodiest conflicts in history weren't just about territory, but about control, about ideology, and about the very survival of entire civilizations? War is as old as humanity itself, a consequence of our ambition, our fears, and our dreams of power. Over hundreds of generations, more than 150 million lives have been claimed by wars across the globe. But some clashes, some enormous struggles, didn't merely redraw maps or topple kings. They rewrote the very fabric of society. In the stories of these wars, we discover not only the chaos and carnage of battle, but the astonishing decisions, hidden motives, and transformative moments that defined what it means to be human. Step back with me into some of the turning points of history, the bloody crossroads, where ambitions collided and fate was decided in fire and steel, in code and conspiracy, in moments of humanity and horror you never learned about in school. Let's begin with World War II. It stands as the deadliest war ever recorded, a cataclysm that swallowed the globe and rewrote world order. More than 70 million people perished. Whole cities, Hiroshima, Dresden, Warsaw, were reduced to memory, skeletons of stone and ash. The world was never the same. But beneath the parades and memorials, the textbook timelines, and famous speeches, there is a shadow realm of secret operations and psychological warfare that truly shaped the war's outcome. Allied cryptographers huddled in hushed corridors, working by the cold light of logic and intuition, decrypting the German Enigma code. In this hidden war of wits, information became as powerful as ammunition. Meanwhile, men like Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Hitler made decisions in dimly lit rooms, weighing hopes against horrors and quietly steering the world's destiny. There were moments, barely mentioned in most histories, when the fate of millions hung on a whisper, a hunch, a risky gamble. Psychological operations sowed discord behind enemy lines, while scientists in secret laboratories raced to split the atom first, knowing that whoever prevailed might hold the fate of nations in their hands. But brutality was not confined to battlefields. Civilians in Leningrad starved and froze in a siege that lasted over 2 years, choosing slow hunger rather than surrender. Families disappeared in the night. Resistance fighters, spies, code breakers, often ordinary people thrust into extraordinary roles, became unsung architects of victory or survival. World War II was not simply a contest of armies, but of ideologies, fascism, communism, and democracy, each claiming the future as its own. When the dust settled, not only had maps changed, worldviews had shifted. Entire systems of belief had collided and, in the aftermath, nothing was certain. Now cast your gaze further back to the roaring cannon and swirling cavalry of the Napoleonic Wars. At the turn of the 19th century, a single man emerged from the chaos of post-revolutionary France, Napoleon Bonaparte. He was, in many ways, an enigma, self-made, relentless, and utterly convinced of his own destiny. Napoleon's genius wasn't just in battle, though his victories shattered the old world order and made European kings tremble. It was in the speed and flexibility of his armies, swift, unpredictable, moving with a ferocity Europe had never seen. His embrace of meritocracy over birthright upended centuries of tradition. He crowned himself emperor, but always called himself the revolution on horseback. Napoleon coerced, charmed, and crushed dozens of nations, uniting swathes of Europe under one banner. And then, as fast as he had risen, it began to unravel. His fateful invasion of Russia turned into one of the greatest disasters in military history. Men freezing in the snow, supplies lost in the whirlwind, an empire crumbling in the cold bite of winter. As coalitions formed to stop him, his own ambition, boundless, unrestrained, became his undoing. By the time he was exiled to a remote island, Europe was forever changed. Old rules had been broken, the seeds of nationalism sown, and the world's understanding of power transformed. Venture even further into the storms of the past, and you'll find the Mongol conquests under Genghis Khan, a name wrapped in awe and dread, a force that reshaped continents. Genghis Khan's campaigns are estimated to have taken 40 million lives, more than the population of some modern countries. His armies swept across Asia and into Europe, uniting vast territories under the banner of a single people. But the Mongol legacy is not only one of destruction. Genghis Khan revolutionized communication, linking East and West with an unprecedented relay system, the Yam, a spine of swiftly moving messengers stretching across continents. He crafted legal codes, encouraged religious tolerance, and ignited commerce along the Silk Road. He was ruthless, but also pragmatic. Cities that surrendered were incorporated. Those that resisted were obliterated. The Mongol method of warfare, brilliant cavalry maneuvers, feigned retreats, psychological tactics, changed the art of war forever. So was Genghis Khan a monster, a bringer of death, or a misunderstood genius, building order out of chaos. His empire, Ushbulwa, eventually splintered, but the connections he forged set the stage for globalization centuries later. Move forward to the 20th century, and wars look different, yet no less perilous. The Cold War, a struggle without pitched battles, yet fraught with invisible risks. The world split into two ideological camps, each armed with nuclear arsenals capable of ending civilization in a single, blinding flash. Instead of armies facing off, the battlegrounds were spy networks, code rooms, satellites circling the Earth, and words transmitted on crackling radios. The fear was constant. One false signal, one hawkish general, one misread radar blip could have started a nuclear holocaust. Yet it was also an era of secret diplomacy, of back-channel negotiations and spy swaps on foggy bridges. Information became the primary weapon. Propaganda, television broadcasts, clandestine funding for revolutions half a world away. Even today, as the files of intelligence agencies are declassified, we uncover plots that seem ripped from a thriller. False defections, psychological experiments, secret treaties. The true scale of what happened behind the curtains of history may never fully be known. Why, though, do these wars matter so much? Beyond the numbers, the weapons, and the smoke, what do they tell us about ourselves? Military historian Dr. James Holland offers this perspective. War has never just been about who has the biggest army. It's about who can outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast their enemies. In the echo of his words, we see that each of these conflicts, whether fought with swords, cannons, or codes, was a test of human imagination as much as brute strength. Conflict analyst Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell adds, "What most people don't realize is that behind every major war, there were moments, brief, silent moments, where peace was possible and then vanished. History is littered with tipping points, missed signals, broken trusts, opportunities to change direction that in the darkness of their time went unseen. But what if, in some cases, the very wars we remember most never happened at all? Take, for example, the Trojan War, immortalized by Homer's epic verse, recounted and reimagined for over 2,000 years. Some historians argue that the tale is pure myth, spun from a weave of poetry and propaganda. Yet this war shaped Athenian culture, inspired Roman legends, and influenced nation-building myths for for centuries. The boundary between fact and fiction, legend and lived reality is often thin, sometimes deliberately blurred by leaders and storytellers alike. Why do we remember certain wars, mythologize them, while forgetting countless others? How do these stories shape our identities, our politics, the lines we draw between us and them? Perhaps because, beyond their violence, wars reveal the deepest truths about humanity, our thirst for meaning, our longing for order, our capacity for both mercy and cruelty. In the crucible of conflict, new technologies emerge, some for destruction, others that later heal or connect us. Allied radar, for instance, arose from fear of bombardment, yet paved the way for today's air traffic systems. Nuclear research, born from an arms race, led to breakthroughs in medicine and energy. At the same time, the costs are staggering. For every innovation, there are scars. Cities erased, families shattered, generations haunted by trauma. The shadow of war looms across centuries, visible in memorials, in disputed borders, in uneasy alliances, and old wounds that never quite heal. The lessons are complex. Wars may end, but consequences ripple outward, remaking the world in ways impossible to predict. Borders drawn by victors in the 20th century still dictate the fate of millions today, in regions from the Middle East to Africa to the Balkans. The technologies, the political ideas, and the divisions born in war shape how we live, how we work, how we understand our place in the world. Look back, and you see that while armies march and empires fall, history is just as often changed by those who work in shadows. The scientists, the code breakers, the diplomats, the ordinary citizens who resist or persevere. In the gaps between bullets and bombs, in the silent moments of choice, the true fate of nations is often decided. Yet as long as memory endures, the stories of these wars are endlessly retold, not only in books or memorials, but in our laws, our relationships between nations, even in our sense of morality. The echoes of battle shape our world in ways we sometimes struggle to recognize. And what of the future? The same impulses, fear, ambition, the desire for security, remain as potent as ever. Today's world is filled with new threats: cyber warfare, advanced drones, geopolitical brinkmanship, and the ever-present risk of misunderstanding in a wired, frantic age. But the lessons of history are there for those willing to look deeper. Every war warns us about the costs of pride, of complacency, of failing to imagine the consequences. It is easy to glamorize victory, harder to count the cost, harder still to embrace the uncomfortable truths woven through every chapter of human conflict. In destruction, there is sometimes invention. In trauma, revelation. And the greatest wars didn't just shape countries. They forged the map of our world, the technology we rely upon, the political systems we inherit, the very language in which we dream of tomorrow. Yet the most important lesson is perhaps the simplest. History doesn't repeat itself. It warns us if we have the courage and the humility to truly listen. As you look back on the wars that shaped humankind, ask not only who won and who lost. Ask what was really at stake, what choices were made in the flickering candlelight of desperate hours, and how, time after time, ordinary people endured the impossible. Because the story of war isn't just a chronicle of violence. It is a tapestry of invention and courage. It is the record of a species struggling, imperfectly, valiantly, to build a world worthy of peace. And in that ongoing struggle, perhaps lies our greatest hope.